I don't want to play Pokopia. If you're going to listen to me talk about these kind of things, it's important that you understand that on some fundamental level, I am a contrarian. There's this imperceptible gauge built into my firmware that measures cultural saturation, and once something crosses that obscure threshold, I find myself wanting to instinctively reject it. I understand this impulse is one that serves me in many ways. I wonder if, in a social species, it doesn't behoove the pack to have a few naysayers who won't go into the light for fear of getting zapped or, worse, looking stupid. But I also understand that unchecked, this tendency can lead to being an immature cynic, the kind of guy who denies himself the cake because of everyone's enthusiastic recommendation. So I try my best not to cut my eyes at the alluring, seductive light of Pokopia. For what feels like the first time in over a decade, a Pokémon release is met with passionate excitement and across-the-board praise instead of the typical reception of the past decade, which is to say either routine, unremarkable satisfaction or, more often than not, pretty universal disappointment. I played nearly every major Pokémon release, of course. I tell myself that buying the games used somehow exempts me from wearing part of the responsibility for the franchise's obvious decline, but even if it's a few years late, I still eventually show up to the party. There's a siren song I can't resist, a tempestuous melody my sentimental, gooey sinner can't help but fall victim to. Some of my most potent, lifelong imaginary friends call these games home. Despite myself, and despite understanding that this attachment is one mainly informed by a hypnotic 3-decade-long marketing campaign, I still cherish them. It's the same kind of irksome attachment that has me buying countless packs of cards just to have an elevated bookmark christened with my favorite guy's image. Besides in my doodles, and besides in those few hazy moments before sleep where fancy feels lived, playing these games is the only way I get to really visit with any of these mystic pets. And yet, the older I get, my want for these daydreams is becoming as disparate and faded as my interest in each new entry. I must imagine that this kind of wistful sentiment is part of the reason why Pokémon remains such a bafflingly successful game franchise despite all of the lukewarm to cold receptions. Its core is a vivid, clear manifestation of an almost primal childish wish. Somewhere in a sea of thousands, there's a magic one made special just for you. It romanticizes the bond between animal and person to the point of almost manic passion. If you've ever really truly looked into the eyes of a furry angel who sees in you the same infinite supply of love that you see in them, your tender heart is eagerly prepped for what might be the world's most cynically successful intellectual property. That's why the games can aim for the middle, I guess. The concept of Pokémon sells itself in spite of the quality of its offerings. The great beast of the Pokémon Company will forever keep on chugging, wrenching itself forward on its many arms, unscathed by paltry things like critical reception. My fleeting appetite for Pokémon has kept me from its many spin-offs. I've never bothered with the Legend series, for instance. On some basic level, these seem like an obvious step in the right direction for a combat system in desperate need of an upgrade, but even that feels like a half measure. The improvements too small and the reception too tepid for me to find any kind of actual earnest interest. The main Pokémon entries aren't faring much better either. Forcing my way through Violet's astonishingly unpolished campaign almost broke my love for the series completely. More than any game so far, it felt like a first draft sent to publisher without edit. An alpha build gussied up and put to market with thin sheets hanging over the unfinished scaffolding and exposed wiring. If the games aren't interested in being of quality, and it really doesn't seem like they are lately, I'm beginning to feel like I'm disrespecting myself by paying for these lackluster experiences. So then what do I make of Pokopia? The trailer vaguely intrigued me, but on the surface, the actual game seems like a derivative Minecraft-like with a coat of Poke Paint. The exact kind of thing I have to instinctively side-eye. It feels like such a crassly intelligent move for the most profitable franchise in history to release a surefire, across-the-board, cozy core life sim hit right as its video game branch's goodwill is starting to tank. How fortunate they just so happen to have a critical darling as marketing begins for the series' next mainline releases. Releases that promise to look good, at least, but have an all-too-familiar stink about them that I can't help but feel I'm being buttered up to accept. Luckily for me, I'm presented with an ethical loophole for my self-imposed restrictions. While Pokopia is the poster child for the new digital keycard system, a system I can't help but feel is another step in an anti-consumer direction, this offers a boon to me uniquely. My best friend and roommate bought the game, so while she's off to work, It's just a short sneak upstairs and a few quick clicks for me to have full access to the game, free of charge. I have her permission, of course, and yet I can't help but feel like I'm doing something naughty. Even before you now, I think I spent all that time blustering about some vague disappointment with Pokémon to shield myself from the fact that I do indeed crave it like the aforementioned cake, and have been eating it in secret just about as guiltily, but with nearly as much glee. Packaged in this roundabout way and playing so devilishly withholding, I've made Pokopia irresistible to myself. And so less is rejection and more chanted as spell, I try not to let a few hours go by without reminding myself that I don't want to keep playing Pokopia. I fought the first few losing battles in a lifelong war with insomnia during the turn of the century. Raised deeply religious, I would struggle when thinking of my heart's one true wish. Trying to fall asleep after sneaking a few extra hours of Pokemon Crystal under the covers, my eyes would flash rapidly with images and imaginations of the pocket-sized world I'd found myself lured into. A shadowy guilt crept into my soul, for I knew deep in my silly little heart what I really wanted, replacing what were nightly prayers with fantasies of traveling the world with Smeargle and Eevee, knowing with absolute clarity and horror that I'd trade going to heaven if it meant I got to live with Pokemon, even just for a little while. There in the year 2000, as an obsessive, lonely, and confused 9-year-old, I felt the childish but honest ache of having to live in a world without Pokemon. If you've ever been the type to use fictional worlds as a salve to soothe the burns from a disappointing real one, I'm sure you might understand the notion. The novelty of Pokopia is that it asks us the opposite. How would Pokemon feel if they found themselves suddenly in a world without us? This question is chiefly answered by the protagonist of Pokopia. Ditto has long been a favorite Pokemon of mine, but my enjoyment for them has been almost always conceptual, relegated to being expressed through favorite anime episodes or merchandise. Despite paying lip service to the idea that any Pokemon can be the strongest, that bonds trump inherent power, it's an uphill battle to use a Pokemon like Ditto in the actual video games. Their signature ability to transform into any other Pokemon is useless to all but the most determined and stubborn, and practice being as cumbersome to use as it is situational. Transforming normally costs a turn in a game where turns are precious, and if the little booger is outsped, then their subpar base stats will have them falling to just about any decently powered attack. This means that it's tough for Ditto to have the spotlight, especially in games where our journeys are chiefly concerned with becoming the very best, i.e. strongest. But I have a special place in my heart for Ditto. Even knowing that they'll never likely win a fight for me, I enjoy the Gumwad enough that it earns a spot on my team in the Let's Go games, the Switch remakes of the original Game Boy entries. This luxury is afforded to me by these games being easy to the point of triviality. Pokemon can also walk alongside you regardless of party position, so even if Ditto serves mainly as mascot, I relish finally getting to play through one of these games with my eagerly plopping little blobby. If you'll indulge me here, in many ways that's the Ditto I'm playing as in Pokopia. My Ditto. The opening minutes make it clear that the Ditto of Pokopia is one that was loved and cared for by a young trainer sent out with a Pokédex to travel in an all-too-familiar world, and it's telling that the game asks you to have them transform into looking like you, so much the little thing must miss us. And so Ditto finds themselves flung helplessly forward into a future where the world has been reduced to devastation, devoid of life and devoid of our beloved trainer. We share this world at first with only one other living creature, the lonely Professor Tangrowth, who has spent what seems to be centuries wandering a withered wasteland, waiting in isolation for anyone else to come back home. I feel embarrassingly spoiled with Professor Tangrowth. The big woolly bush and his little red-booted baby have been lifelong favorites of mine, and I couldn't ask for a better companion to share this adventure with. This Tangrowth was once the companion to the Old World's professor, and in this new era he plays the part just the same, being the wise old curious thing that sends little us, Pokédex in hand, out on our adventure through the ruined region ahead of us. It comes close to being too much to bear, noticing what comprises the few treasures Tangrowth has to console himself, namely the worn old button-up shirt that tops the pile and looks to have been held and rubbed to dinginess and loved just about as much. The unspoken heartbreak of separation and loneliness being the first and most potent color the game uses from its heartfelt palette. The mysteries continue as a dehydrated Squirtle apparates into our view, and quickly with our first few transformations and first few skills learned, the first few pieces are set back into place as we begin the patient and plodding work of building the world right again. In an interview with VGC, Senior Director for Pokopia, Shigeru Omori, cites his work as a map designer on the Game Boy Advance Pokémon entries as inspiration for Pokopia's core habitat mechanic. When I was creating the map, which was 2D at the time, I was putting grass onto it. That feeling of Pokémon appearing when I was creating the habitat was very interesting to me, and that feeling is something I cherish. I can feel that joy made manifest with absolute clarity as I pull up patches of tall grass for Bulbasaur to call home. Filling the land, I can't help emulating the firmly established design rules of Pokémon's long life as a tile-based series. It's telling that this is the angle they chose for both the box art and the money shot in the trailer, making it clear that this game is in many ways meant to be the Pokémon maker that many have dreamed of. By decentering battles and focusing on how and where they live, Pokémon are now rightly more tenderly considered as living creatures with unique needs. Every section of battered Earth is an opportunity to beckon the world's lost creatures back from beyond the pale. There is a tangible sense of playing researcher and caretaker in formulating these habitats. A digestible and readable and easily intuited way to express each Pokémon's wants and comforts. This is a more obvious and personal fantasy of catching them all than ever before. Part of this series' appeal is that of playing field scientist, documenting the flora and fauna of this strange planet, and the dream has never been more fully realized than this. So much more engaging than the tired routine of walking back and forth in tall grass or watching Pokémon mill about in empty space. Each disparate cluster that can call a Pokémon back home is referred to as its habitat, and these habitats are just as lovingly categorized and quantified as you'd hope from a series so enthusiastically preoccupied with checklists and datasets. These little vignettes serve as much-needed blueprints and guideposts for how to fill the sprawling play space. The last game we covered on this channel was Animal Crossing New Horizons, and while I understand that both games are attempting to accomplish wildly different things, I can't help but compare the experiences directly. And here, having setups prescribed for me to place does wonders for keeping up my creative stamina. Enough so that by the time I make it to the late game, I've actually remained far more emboldened to take on large-scale builds than I ever have in these kinds of sandbox games. It should be apparent to the eagle-eyed that Pokopia is a sequel of sorts. Surveying the ruined landscapes quickly reveals them to be the dilapidated and ruined infrastructure of Kanto, the original setting for the series, lifting the aesthetics for objects and tiles directly from the aforementioned Let's Go games. These memorable and nostalgic tableaus are recreated and ruined with thoughtful tact. I would have never thought that the innocuous raised bump that once housed Fuchsia City's gym would be one of Kanto's most instantly recognizable landmarks, but here I knew it in seconds. Kudos to the designer who chose this as Pokopia's opening stage. Multiple upheavals and upsets have struck the world. Roads have been thrust erratically skyward, sections of Earth blighted in totality, but most pressing of all is the rainless sky. As the parched earth in our favorite shrub tells us, the world now finds itself in permanent drought. The answer to this big mystery seems clear at first to me. The world is empty because everyone's dead. Nature had enough. The time finally came for humanity to pay the piper, and he'd grown monstrous while we procrastinated, and we found ourselves unable to pay his grisly bill. And yet, though our wizened guide, the main thing our professor supplies us with is his one guiding, naive hope. Surely it might rain again, and the people might come back home if we just keep doing what we can, little by little. I think that's why I'm willing to buy into the power of our little Ditto. What with the bleak circumstances almost forcing an overwhelming need to believe in a love that could do anything. Miracles have always been right under the surface in Pokémon. Belief shapes reality in a tangible way, and in this heightened space, I have no doubt that a seemingly useless little snot could pull a livable planet back out of the dirt inch by inch through sheer loyalty and determination. Pokopia does an excellent job of lightening the load, however. The responsibility and burden is not solely on the player. Every monster retrieved is another eager participant in the world's reshaping, Revived and brought back from the same digital slumber we found ourselves in once a livable section of Earth is prepared, the world slowly fills with our missing Pokémon, though all are just as confused by the state of the planet as we are. Much of the framework of a typical Pokémon RPG is removed in Pokopia. Moves and even discrete elemental typings are vaguely suggested at and softened in this new system. As far as I can tell, as long as a Pokémon can perform one of the various tasks, such as growing plants or processing ore, there are no major benefits to choosing one over the other. Efficiency, finally realizing that his logical conclusion had long since been reached, at last exits the decision-making process after decades of tyrannical rule. What a systematically felt relief for an RPG that has always begged for you to travel with whoever you pleased, but discouraged you all the same. It's through this now equalized power of the small creatures that a plan is concocted, old beliefs tested in earnest hope that they might be true, and, though tauntingly brief, for the first time in centuries, the few who remain call the rain back home, and with it a voice from the sea. Kyogre, who for the uninitiated is essentially the ocean and rain made manifest, gives us our first answer for why the world has fallen in the way it has. While couching it in a good-natured tone, Kyogre makes it clear that it went to sleep deep at the bottom of the ocean to get away from some great fuss the humans were making, and apparently taking with it the rain itself. Thanks to the hopeful work of the little ones, however, the rain now finally falls again as it should. Pokopia's opening act is genuinely quite stirring. I find myself a bit shocked by it. Despite always going in wanting to be moved in some way, I really do try to have an open heart with these kinds of things. I haven't felt as if a Pokémon title has had anything meaningful to say since 2016 Sun and Moon. Here in Pokopia, though, the motivation for action is made abundantly clear and overwhelmingly felt. And while I do struggle with some of the grittier details of the actual block placing and resource gathering, the call to action is invigorating enough that my willpower is pushed to its limit. I go into every play session with a 2-hour maximum, and it takes every ounce I have in me to keep to it. Thankfully, in addition to the power of my own mantra, I can rely on the knowledge gained from the title, which isn't just an awkward portmanteau of Pokémon and Utopia. It also comes from the Spanish phrase poco a poco, or little by little, or poco a Pokémon, which is to say that this urgent and overwhelming task of complete global rehabilitation is one that must be done here much as I imagine it must be done in our world. Slow and steady, piece by piece. If it wasn't obvious by my rosy, prosy description of the game's opening act, I find myself unbearably smitten by Pokopia's sweet charm. Much like you, I live in a world ruled by foul specimens, obsessed with pushing civilization to the edge of annihilation with what seems to be hedonistic glee. And a future of total devastation feels more and more to the cynical mind like a fully capitalized win instead of the ever-hopeful but lowercase if. So, I guess what I'm saying is that I'm plucked, seasoned, and brined in preparation for a game where the basic gameplay loop involves fixing a broken Earth, even if I truly find the nuts and bolts of it all mechanically dull. The power and danger of Pokopia's gameplay loop is that it feels as if you're really doing something noble and good. Even progressing into the late game, genuine narrative motivation blurs some of the game's more glaring flaws. I'm intrinsically invested in making comfortable, thoughtful homes for each of the game's creatures. There is a question, though, the yellow rat in the room, so to speak. Would I have even bothered with this game if it wasn't Pokémon? It's quite the answerable question, too. Pokopia was developed in tandem by both Game Freak, the typical and notorious Pokémon developers, and Omega Force, a division of Koei Tecmo who, most relevant today, worked on Dragon Quest Builders 2. Watching trailers for that game after playing Pokopia, it's impossible not to see how much of Pokopia's skeleton is borrowed from Builders 2. From the obvious UIs that seem changed only in flavor, to basic gameplay loops, down to discrete area levels, and even the painting system. What I'm getting at here is that my question has already been answered. There have basically been Pokopias without the Pokémon, and frankly, even still, I'm not all that interested in them. It isn't like I don't like Dragon Quest either. I love Dragon Quest XI, and in spite of being on the other side of hating turn-based RPGs and sprawling campaigns, I was so completely swooned by Eleven's worlds, creatures, and heartfelt story that when I lost my save file of hundreds of hours due to a fatal PlayStation bug, I immediately bought it on the Switch and started it over from the beginning with eager and undaunted enthusiasm. There, again, much like Pokopia, my passionate attachment really had nothing to do with the genre or even the gameplay loop itself. The JRPG is one I've mostly lost my taste for, and my enthusiasm instead has everything to do with palpable motivation, good writing, and simple mechanics executed with mastery. But even being prepped to like it in the way I was, Builders 2 still kinda looks like pee-pee poo-poo to me. And even being utterly in love with the monsters from that world, I mean, shout out to Lump Wizard, Fungool, Platypunk, Exoskeleton, Hat Hamwich, and Crabber Dabber Doo, the absolute mad lads, but even they can't get me all the way to wanting to play the Builder series. I'm only ever passingly interested in Minecraft-style gameplay, and I'm enough of a vain prima donna that the game's slightly ugly cruft makes it nearly unpalatable. And also, if I'm being completely honest with myself, the question of if I'd like Pokopia if it wasn't Pokémon is a bit reductive. If those other things were Pokémon, they'd be Pokémon, and they're not. Pokopia's dual-developed nature can be felt in many ways. Monsters can all pitch in and help you build two types of structures, the kind that are comprised of placeable individual cubes and the kind that are fully modeled props, that look and function as buildings typically do in the Pokémon games, being bigger on the inside and involve going to a separately loaded zone. Both types of buildings gel together better than I thought they would, though it still sometimes takes a concerted amount of effort to keep the game from looking like two halves mashed somewhat undelicately together. Pokopia has quite a dedicated art style. The brightly lit creature models pop irresistibly against the game's dreamy color palette. The modeled buildings and plentiful props carry a toyetic charm drawn from a deep love of the series' blocky birthplace. But the hills, cliffs, and structures formed from all those harsh-edged cubes stick out quite ungracefully to me. I feel like it's taken all 100 hours of my playthrough so far to work out how to soften and hide the garish edges forced by the rigid rules of square the game has to play by. As I'm now sifting through my umpteenth 99 stack of cliff rock or volcanic ash, I see the virtue of New Horizons letting you summon an infinite amount of earth while terraforming. Having every block accounted for is both tedious and overwhelming. The game is at its worst when having to do the eternal and all too familiar Minecraft chess dance. And while the bartering system does its best to unburden you with the absurd amount of detritus you'll inevitably obtain, the headache never really leaves. In fact, it only seems to worsen the more toys I'm given to play with. Many of Pokopia's systems feel hastily fastened together without much thought. Much is made of crops and cooking, but supplying yourself with enough of either takes really only seconds of engagement. Replenishing them is rote. And both systems feel like reheated leftovers from the game this one's built on, and I can't help but feel it's all a bit undercooked and perfunctory. There was wordless teaching in pairing your acquisition of Water Gun, an ability that allows you to hydrate only a small cross-section of tiles, with learning how to make it rain, a zone-wide hydration of any exposed tile. If something in this game feels annoying and repetitive, that's the game's way of telling you that there's an easier way coming eventually, and you really shouldn't sweat it if you don't want to. This is that little-by-little philosophy informing the game in full, and why even most of those annoyances end up looking like charming features when hit with enough rosy light. I don't want to overstate the game's flaws, but I don't want to undersell them either. I think there's a sloppiness and bugginess that kind of speaks for itself, but even that is almost at home with Pokémon, and the game has earned enough goodwill with me that I'm willing to put in a little extra legwork to excuse the mishaps. Restricting myself to only playing for a few hours each day did wonders in helping me maintain my interest. The checklist is exceedingly long in Pokopia. The long tail of completion is still unraveling ahead of me long after I've seen the credits. I spent my first few weeks of the game never leaving the starting area. Quantifying each Pokémon's happiness as a discrete comfort level gave a focused mind like mine an irresistible task to latch onto. I unwittingly raised the zone's habitability to maximum without even meaning to, and without ever stepping foot into any of the game's other areas. After a stellar opening act, it was hard not to find the next two areas of the game underwhelming in their execution. The next zone I uncovered was Bleak Beach, a devastated and cloud-covered coastal city, and here the game's quest structure completely failed me. I had taught myself how electricity worked, found the loving little hints at where the missing infrastructure was supposed to go, and turned all of the lights in town back on before the game ever made a peep. All because the trigger for the main quest is hidden behind the seemingly unrelated and frankly unimportant task of placing flower planters in front of Meowth's house. I've at this point been pretty eager to play in lockstep with the game. I want to play by its patient but vague rules. I kept fixing up the area's electrical grid in hopes that the story would start up again, but because of the strange progression checks, I was left feeling completely out of the loop. I imagine that this is the case for many people in Bleak Beach. I watched as the exact same befuddling sequence of events played out in my roommate's playthrough, and again, it seems, as always, these sandbox games could really stand to put a bit more railroading in their mission design, especially if I still have to essentially ride the rails anyways. What this means is that once the main quest actually started in proper, I had already done everything before we got there, every step of the way, and the game accounted for this with awkward shuffling and stilted dialogue. That isn't to say that turning the lights back on in full isn't satisfying. It genuinely is, and like most of the areas, it's a joy to reconstruct and it's a joy to call my own. I feel that about each area of the game, even Rocky Ridges, which remains the most devastated area of all for me, being comprised of the few remaining streets of a town decimated by volcanic activity. Here the game introduces an ill-defined mood mechanic that, while thematically interesting, is mechanically nebulous to the point of feeling irrelevant when applied to any other area of the game. But again, here I struggle to hold on to any negative feelings for yet another poorly implemented system thanks to narrative goodwill. I think it's quite potent that you're never encouraged to clear out the tectonic devastation in Rocky Ridges. The game does its best to stress that task's unfeasibility to the player. Instead, here, the lesson and main quest is about keeping your chin up, finding a reason to party anyways, and learning to enjoy the comfort of others even in the face of hopelessness. My key motivation is still that ever-distant friend I know in my heart I'll probably never see again. And slowly the shape changes to not reaching for what isn't there, but learning to love what is. A wide vein of dramatic irony runs through the campaign of Pokopia. Much of the story is told through the scavenged notes and journals we find around the ruined Kanto. This is just for us, however, the audience. Ditto and even Professor Tangrowth, it seems, are both unable to read. As the game reminds us, on the whole, Pokemon are simple, innocent creatures. And so they continue their journey to find the lost humans oblivious to the truth that we piece together through these scattered entries. While many of the notes offer up simple, mundane glimpses into life before the fall, a few tell us the story quite plainly. Natural disasters began to slowly ramp up around the globe, reaching a point where it was clear that life on the planet would not survive without intervention. Pokemon have long been able to be turned into digital files that the player can store on a network hosted by the many computers found throughout the world's plentiful Pokemon centers. This has always seemed to me a matter of convenience, a piece of world building informed more by a need to manage hundreds of potential party members than anything else, and it's a background detail that I've always kind of taken for granted, and it's thrilling to see it utilized in such a way here. Humanity was unequipped to stop the encroaching apocalypse, and so while we retreated into space to avoid extinction, all of the Pokemon that we could fit were safely stored away into the cloud, frozen in digital stasis, only to be released if the environment were ever to become livable again. The pieces to this puzzle are given to the player quite early on. The humans aren't dead, but they have long since left the planet, so the professor's earnest belief that his missing people are always just around the next corner is a constant source of sobering heartbreak. Pokopia doesn't tell us the why of the apocalypse quite so directly, however. In some ways, it seems like my gut instinct was right. When we turn the lights back on in Vermilion, Raikou immediately begins destroying the area with lightning, thinking that the humans had returned, only relenting when he realizes it's just us little Pokemon. High above the clouds, we find the final area of the game. Saffron City has been pulled from the earth in prismatic, glistening chunks. This final devastation resulting in a dreamlike landscape that is incredibly challenging to force back into a walkable, livable state, but is all the more rewarding for the effort. Here we meet the crafty Tink Master, and the narrative relief of having someone else with an eye for design is overwhelming. Tink's presence in the game unlocked a final piece of the puzzle for me. Her structures are slapdash, composed of odds and ends. God bless and embrace this mess. Her strange eye for design gave me permission to just put stuff everywhere, get funky with it, get it out of your pockets, and more importantly, put some pipes on it. At first I found myself at odds with her strange towers, but now I can't help but scowl at anyone who would demolish her beautiful art. With Tink's help, we eventually reconstruct the familiar Sylph Tower. Once the skyscraper is put back into place though, an ominous portal rips open across the sky. The image presented here at the top of the tower speaks for itself. The old ways are over. The old tools have no use anymore, and Mewtwo is its own master. Like the legendary encounters at the end of every other area scenario though, this one also ends with a bit of a limp fizzle. Once Mewtwo realizes we aren't humans, they drop the intimidation routine and vaguely gesture at the next objective. This is one of Pokopia's great flaws. Its conflict-free story beats always leave me feeling a bit wanting. However, this is the final piece of the puzzle in many ways. It seems the legendaries, which is to say the physical manifestations of nature's powerful forces, rendered their Ragnarok judgment on civilization, and now guard the earth, prepared to strike if we ever return. I'm a bit shocked at the implications. I wouldn't have imagined the story of a Pokemon game would ever have such a critique of its humans. Normally theirs is a utopia kind of unquestioned. A world at peace thanks to a global economy and system of governance fueled by a planet-wide obsession with battling Pokemon. Evil in this world is typically the result of a few bad actors in an otherwise harmonious setting. But here we see the humans aren't let off the hook. Something clearly had to change. That way of living simply could not sustain itself forever, and if the humans are ever to return to the setting, I don't think they could ever go back to treating the Earth and her creatures in the way we have for the many games that preceded this. A society that produces Pokemania seemingly isn't one that can hold. But even this isn't so black and white, and the looseness of this game's scenario and script affords many interpretations. The people are deeply missed. You overhear Pokemon yearning to hear the children play in the tall grass near their dens. The scattered memories and photographs overwhelmingly show a society of people who loved their world and loved their animals, despite not being able to be the global stewards that they should be. There's a thoughtfulness in this approach, even if I sometimes find myself agreeing with nature's conclusion here that it's going to take a great mighty shriek to shake us off of our current trajectory. There's no clean-cut answer to this seemingly inevitable and heartbreaking problem. I imagine climate anxiety is only going to inspire more and more of these kinds of stories, and I'm glad Pokopia chooses to be tender. It's clear that it's the love that makes the world worth sharing with us, and it's that same love that has Ditto still fixing it all anyways. The narrative movements of this game have remained small. Most everything that happened before we got there. Though our actions may cause great ancient forces to wake up and threaten climax, they only ever stretch, yawn, and call dibs on a cozy corner nearby. Pokopia sees a narrative mostly free of interpersonal conflict, in some ways subtly positing that conflict of that nature is the realm of the people, not the creatures. Leafeon's right to think that now that everyone has a home just for them, maybe we can finally leave all that petty squabbling behind. It's simple. It's bittersweet, naive, and his hopeful contemplation continues with the game's ending. After a sequence of frankly confusing events coordinated by the long-dead voices of society's lost misfits, we get a chance to send a message to the distant humans. Though the world of Pokemon postures itself as utopia, it never has an answer for what to do with those of us who don't fit into its rigid mold. We find out that the losers and the weirdos and the criminals over at Team Rocket were only allowed entry onto humanity's arc if they were willing to be broken up. Which, even though they're scoundrels, I'm sure you know that's really no choice at all. The game smartly never answers or even really asks if the abandoned rocket ship is full of the bodies of the poor left-behind villains. The final log of the game implies that humanity's desperate flight to the stars is one that might leave them forever trapped. And even though they were left behind, Team Rocket intends to send them enough fuel to make it back home. It's only a happy accident that our celebration with Professor Tangrowth activates the rocket's launch sequence, which feels a bit unsatisfying, but with its payload of fuel, supplies, and a little bit of hope, the team's rocket goes blasting off again. As the credits roll, the visuals shift to the abstracted, communicating to me that what we see next is loose and interpretive. The rocket travels deep through space, an unfathomably long distance. The journey is tough. The ship is battered, but even if our efforts to fix the world doesn't bring the people back, if nothing else, we can rest easy knowing a much-needed glimmer of hope is sent to someone far away who loves his Pokémon almost as much as they love him, even if it's from a universe away. The professor concludes that whatever we did, he's sure that it will one day help the humans come back home. I'm not sure if I think that's a good thing. Like his naive hope earlier in the story, I think that this is also a bit misinformed and maybe even a bit misguided. I'm not sure how you go back to games about enthusiastic trainer life in quite the same way after a poignant game like Pokopia. It holds the building blocks for a better future for the franchise. In my more passionate moments, I can almost trick myself into thinking it has within it the building blocks for a better future for us, too. Its cautionary tale feeling all the more prescient the more time I sit with it. I hope that the virtues learned from this more patient and passive approach to monster rearing informs how the main series develops in the future. To me, Pokémon is at a crossroads. It needs to change. It almost has to. The universal acclaim that this game has received feels like it could be a double-edged sword, though. I'm not sure if a direct sequel or even DLC is what I want out of Pokopia. Just wanting more of what worked before is how the series has gotten here. And I don't know if lifting its mechanics and placing them in the main series is a proper answer either. I think that Pokopia is a right first step, a delicate promise that I hope is handled with care. I'm left with a childish hope. That's the key feeling that Pokopia leaves me with. Hope that it all might just work out anyways. Hope that a stubborn series finally learns this valuable lesson in inspiring pathos and changes its tired ways before its faux utopia really does crumble. I'm filled with hope again that my love for these creatures isn't undeserved and it isn't routine. There's still stories worth telling about them, and despite everything, the world really is better with them in it. Well, shmee outie, and thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you're watching this on its release day, then guess what, Poke Freaks? Today is the day my favorite and beloved Sableye finally makes his way to Pokopia. Can you imagine being me? My new favorite Pokemon game stars Smeargle, Tangrowth, and Ditto, and I get to reward myself with my all-time favesy the day I post my essay? Call it serendipity if you like, I'll just call myself savvy. Though I am so completely spoiled for favorites, as always I still find myself wanting more. Who else do you think should be in Pokopia? I love Stabot. Their design is so clean, like if Dr. Eggman and Dr. Wily collabed on a genderqueer Gardevoir with murderous intent, and I would love for them to someday prowl the streets of my sparkling Skyland. But what about you? Are there any missing monsters in Pokopia's Pokedex that you wish you could build a home for? Did your favorite make the cut? Comment down below. I read each and every one of them, by the way. So in addition to liking this video and subscribing, which please do if you want to communicate to YouTube that you want me to keep making these videos, I'd be honored if you also commented and told me your favorite Pokemon. The beauty of this series is that every one of these weird thingies has someone who loves them, no matter how uggo. I wasn't sure if I was going to make a video on Pokopia. I felt as if I was almost cheapening it for myself, looking at it through the lens of making content about it. Initially, this video was going to be a short first impression, but the more I played, the more I realized that there's something special with this one that I wanted to express. Something I didn't want to get lost in all the noise of tips, tricks, and viral builds. Nothing's been cheapened for me. In fact, it's only been enhanced. I am incredibly lucky, and I thank you for the opportunity and the support. Last time we talked in this space, I told you that my next long-form video was going to be on the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, and that still is the case. Like with Pokopia, there is something special that I want to tell you about these ladies, though that special thing is cut from a very different cloth. As I'm just now finishing my first pass of cutting up hundreds of hours of episodes into manageable chunks with my notes fit to burst, I have to face the fact that making a comprehensive video on 6 seasons of television is an entirely different beast than making a retrospective on a video game. My God, though, the drama! My work continues eagerly, and I'm so blessed to be able to do it, but it truly might take me forever. However, I can't promise that there won't be a video or two between now and then. And hey, if you have any ideas for topics you'd like for me to cover, you should comment down below. I've certainly got some ideas, almost too many to pick from, so your feedback would be most welcome. Well, I reckon that just about does it for today. Y'all take care now. Snooze out.
Heather, I can be nasty right now. That's what you got 2 faces.
Gagging.
I'm trying to manage
Well, I need
this.
to know one of them because you have very many faces. And
What have I
Lisa
done that
was
shows a
with me.
2-face?
I can't. I don't want this around Walter. He's very upset right now. Sorry, Walter.